Hello and welcome to the ODOT Litter Management webinar. My name is Paula Hyman from the Ohio LTAP Center, and I'm going to be your technical support for today's webinar. Just a couple of housekeeping items. If you have questions throughout the presentation, please put those into the questions box, and our presenter will address your questions via email at the completion of the webinar. The webinar is being recorded, and providing that the recording is successful, a YouTube link and a copy of the presentation will be emailed to all participants, and it is also available in the handout section right now. I want to thank you in advance for your participation, and I'm going to pass things off to Mr. Joel Hunt, Program Administrator with ODOT Highway Beautification. Joel?
Hello, everybody. Thank you for the introduction. So I think we're going to start today with a couple poll questions, but I'll just speak briefly about how I got into this role and where ODOT is with its litter strategy. So I've worked with ODOT now for 25 years. 20 of those years was in our communications office. I was a public information officer, and while I was in that role, talking with the media and elected officials and the general public, I always got questions. Why do surrounding states have less litter than Ohio? Why don't we have wildflowers planted like other states? So I thought about it and then just presented a proposal to our executive leadership. And I was like, we have Adopt a Highway, we have, a wildflower planting program. Let's just bring it all together under one highway beautification program and address everything. So that's what we did in 2017, and we hit the ground running. We started with a major litter research project. We held summits around the state. We developed a litter prevention campaign, and we've kind of expanded in our litter efforts from just being highway workers who pick up the litter to a multitude of people. So we'll get into all that in the presentation. But I thought it'd be fun to start with a couple of poll questions to just kind of set the framework for this presentation. And I think I'm going to hand that back and let you read the poll question.
Yep, so I already launched the first one, and it's what is the most littered item in Ohio? We have about 72% of the votes in right now, so I'm going to give you another couple of seconds to answer before we close it. And so the results are 32% said fast food, 25% said tobacco related, 11% said paper plastic bags, and 32% said beverage containers. All right, our second question is up, or coming up here. How much collectively does Ohio spend on litter removal each year? 8 million, 14 million, 19 million, or 47 million? And we have about 46% of the votes in. Just going to give you another few seconds. So for this one, 14% said 8 million, 25% said 14, 25% said 19, and 36% said 47 million.
Okay, well, I think you all did pretty well. Okay, so next slide, the topics. Today I want to talk about our litter prevention and abatement programs. As I spoke to you earlier with our litter prevention, that's all data-based. We've done surveys, we've done visibility studies, these summits. So I want to give some highlights on all of those, and then talk about the different contractors and partners that we have in actually picking up the trash, which is litter abatement. Next slide. So our litter summits began in 2018, and we did have them in 5 Ohio cities. We tried to have representation from the large metro areas as well as southeastern Ohio. Each one of those identified specific litter issues, whether it be illegal dumping, roadside litter, unhoused individual encampments. So we had these litter summits throughout the year. We invited everyone from law enforcement, prosecutor, judges. You can see the list there. It was quite broad. We had a lot of great presentations from national speakers from universities, and we identified as part of the litter summits the local hotspots, areas of concern, as well as what resources are being spent or invested in litter prevention. Next slide. So our litter study began with a litter visibility study. We had researchers go out into the field and look at the 56 randomized sites, and that was on ODOT system only, so state, U.S., and interstate highways. We wanted to know what were the socioeconomic factors surrounding that area, whether it's beside, a big box store that would sell things that would fly off of trucks. Just an example would be a home improvement store where insulation or something could be blowing around. So we also did a characterization, and those are the most littered items. And we did some behavioral studies as well. We looked at, we did 700 people responded to our focus groups and our online household surveys. And we also wanted to capture what is the total cost of litter in Ohio, not just ODOT, not just roadways, but in Ohio. How is tourism and economic development impacted, our health and safety, and the environment? And we also talked with surrounding states to find out how they fund their litter programs. Next slide. So we had 71 sites around the state, and we wanted to represent the major metropolitan areas. And again, down in southeastern Ohio, where we tend to find a lot of illegal dumping as a major problem related to litter. One fact I want to point out here is that we surveyed 1.8 million square feet, and we measured litter that was larger than 1 inch squared. Next slide. And so just because of the vast amount of litter that's on a roadside, they were categorized into beverage containers, beverage related. You can see the different categories that we came up with. Next slide. So these are the results of the earlier poll. So beverage containers, and that includes alcoholic and soft drink containers, are the most littered item in Ohio, representing what, 18%. Fast food, we expected that to be a little higher, but it came in about 8%. And the paper and plastic bags, you see them in trees and shrubs. They seem to be more visible than they are. They actually are the lowest representation. Next slide, please. So in addition to looking at the visibility, like what is out there, we wanted to understand the behaviors and beliefs surrounding litter. And so we measured how Ohioans feel about littering and its impact on the communities. We wanted to know what individuals consider is litter and their perception of the severity. I'm going to give an example. So you're driving to work, you have a banana or an apple, you throw it out the window. Is that litter because it's organic? Well, it draws wildlife to the road, and we have vehicle mortality. And also we framed it, if you go to a public park, with your children, and there's all kinds of food scraps laying around, do you consider that to be litter? So we posed those questions in our focus groups, and we also wanted to find out who's most likely to litter. Next slide. So this is the 700 people that we polled. in the quantitative portion of our study, we wanted to look at age groups of 16 to 34, which past litter studies have presented that category as being the most likely to litter. And the qualitative would be where we have focus groups. We invited in individuals from certain demographics, were they smokers? I'll get into some of the other criteria in a moment, but it was just as you imagine. I mean, there was a one-way mirror. We had people on the one side measuring responses, and then a facilitator inside, and gathered a lot of really good information. So yes, we had at least 25% in each group were smokers, parents with children, and we divided half in urban areas and half from rural areas. And we also wanted to capture a good mix of race, gender, and socioeconomic status. So the key findings of our research project, that small pieces of paper are the most frequently littered items. Now that can be a little misleading, at least from ODOT's perspective, because we have mowers go out, and if they don't get all the litter before the mowing occurs, a fast food wrapper can be a million little pieces. So I would say that skews it just a little bit. The organic materials, the apples, the fruit, cigarette butts. We obviously didn't take the time on a roadside to count cigarette butts, but where we did find those were at urban interchanges. You're waiting at the stoplight, you empty your ashtray out. So, and interestingly, 53% of the smokers admitted that they had littered a butt, in the last month. Next slide. We also wanted to know, what people think Ohio is doing as far as litter prevention and litter abatement. So we presented the question, and the participants in the groups didn't really know who was responsible for picking up the litter. But when they were pressured, most people responded by saying, we get free labor from the prisons, which, this has gone to the Supreme Court. You have to be careful. We don't force labor. In talking with rehab and corrections, we find that it's actually a coveted job. It's a privilege.
Joel, sorry, I don't want to interrupt. I just want to make sure I have them on the right slide. What are we on? Key findings 1 or 2?
2.
Okay.
Thank
you.
Yes. Thanks. And so yes, the inmate labor. I think that's because most people, see someone in an orange jumpsuit that stands out and that's memorable to them, as opposed to maybe just a highway technician doing his or her job. And they really had no concept of what was spent on litter. So that was some interesting information that we gathered. Next slide. This was the most surprising, the amount of money that is spent in Ohio, and this is not just ODOT specific. You can see that the majority is made up by state, county, and municipal governments. Universities and schools also spend a good chunk of money on it, and solid waste municipal districts, those quote-unquote haul routes, as people are taking, garbage from the household or business into a landfill. So they're spending, $1.4 million on that. Next slide. So once we compiled all the data, it was a year-long study. Our obvious goal was to prevent litter, because we know that no matter how much we spend on picking up litter, it'll be back. And so the only solution to the litter problem is through education and prevention, and the help from not only the police officers that recognize and cite litterers, but also going through prosecution and the judicial, trying to reduce it, through the courts. But so the Governor DeWine, wanted us to work with the Ohio EPA to kind of address more of the illegal dumping aspect, and also the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, who maintains Ohio's beaches and hiking trails and large state parks. And so the three agencies worked together, and we did have a consultant help us with the brand and the logo. So our campaign is "A Little Litter is a Big Problem," and we have brand guidelines that can be made available to you. And over to the right on this slide is just an example of one of the advertising pieces that could be done with it. So to date, the logo is on our Sponsor a Highway signs, which we'll get into here in just a second. Next slide. And this is Sponsor a Highway. So Sponsor a Highway is a program very similar to the blue signs you see as you're approaching an exit that tells you, gas, lodging, and restaurants. It's a third party. It's technically not affiliated with ODOT. What they do is they solicit businesses and sell them segments of highway. So it would be 1 mile in one direction, and they have a monthly cost to that sponsor. It's really good advertising. It's affordable advertising, and in exchange, we have 2 vendors that we awarded the contract to. We'll pick up the litter. They'll maintain the signs. They design and print and install the signs and maintain them. They haul away the litter. They provide their own bags and vans and everything. It's literally turnkey, and so it helps us. We recently got a report from one of our vendors that here in Columbus, last week, a contract was signed for 200 segments. So one company has purchased 200 miles, and they're going to clean that one time per month plus an extra clean, so 13 cleans per year. So the benefit to ODOT is that obviously our roads are going to be cleaner, but it also allows our highway technicians to focus on more important work on the roadway, fixing potholes and guardrails and culverts and those sorts of things. So yeah, you will notice in here where it says litter is picked up twice per month. There's some flexibility in what the sponsor wants to do or what their needs are. So it's a really good program, and it's growing fast, and we're very happy. Now there has been some interest, I know, since we're a home rule state, with the vendors working with municipalities and kind of having a continuation, as maybe an interstate lookalike passes through a municipality. The way the contract is written now, it stops at the corporation limit and then begins again after. So, let's say, for instance, Chick-fil-A is located just inside that boundary. They're trying to get to work with the municipalities to get that sponsorship all the way through communities. So they may be reaching out to you. So the 2 vendors that were awarded the contract, they both unfortunately have Adopt a Highway in their name, which creates confusion, but one is Adopt a Highway Litter Removal Services of America, and the other is Adopt a Highway Maintenance Corporation. And they've both been around for decades. You can see their presence across the country. The purple colored is the states that have both companies, working, and the red and the blue are obviously just the one vendor. So they've been very aggressive with their marketing. They've been focusing essentially on Cleveland and Columbus now. I think now that all the available segments in Columbus have been sold, that they'll be moving into the Cincinnati, Dayton, Toledo areas, some of the the outliers. So we're very pleased with that program. Next slide. And remember, I talked about the litter prevention brand at the bottom of the sponsor highway sign is our a little litter is a big problem campaign message. Next slide. So I just want to touch briefly on Adopt a Highway. That's a long-standing program that we've had here at the department. We maintain about 1,400 groups statewide. We'll gain some, we'll lose some. We ask that they pick up litter 4 times per year, and they adopt a 2-mile stretch, and that's both directions, or one interchange. And they do that for 2 years. So we've kind of over the years we've had local coordinators, take the responsibility, and then someone else will come in. So all of our paperwork was paper files, and they'd get lost, and there was really no way to track the productivity. So we invested in a technology, our collector web app, and we use this now. It's public facing on our website. Groups that are interested can apply online, and all the exchanges are electronic. Next slide. And it's a map-based system, and so you can identify an area that's not currently adopted, and you can see that there's hotels in the area, or another business who may be interested. So instead of waiting for the phone to ring, for someone saying that they wanted to adopt, then we can solicit them. So that's become a good advantage. And just from a management perspective, visually, it's a lot easier to see what groups we have where. Next slide, please. So all that data can be aggregated into a dashboard that we can, present to executive leadership, and they can see in a quick glance how many active permits we have, when they're going to expire, what our presence is. So the volunteer program, it saves ODOT, I wouldn't say a lot of money, but a lot of time in going out and picking up, and we need our volunteers, and we're so lucky to have them. And we use this tool also for recognition. It gives us alerts when a permit is about to expire, so we can reach out to them, give some encouraging words, and hopefully have them re-sign, as well as maintain our Gold Star groups, which are groups that have met all the criteria. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to talk just briefly about some of the other tools that we're using now. As I said, we, for decades, we're spending about $4 million per year on litter removal, and that figure is now $10 million because we've added this contractor in particular, Interstate Business Solutions out of Indiana. They cover in the red box Cincinnati, Dayton, Columbus, a total of 7 urban areas, and they do deep cleans, and so they're very skilled at getting the cleanings done. And so when this report was run at the end of 2022, in 10 months they had already collected 770 tons of litter. And if you all know what a roll-off container is, it's 40 yards. We have those at our garages in these areas, and in some cases we're having those emptied twice a week. Just an incredible amount of trash that's out there, but also that's being cleaned up by this group. So while it is expensive, it is effective and efficient. Next slide. Another group that we've worked with now for multiple years is the Center for Employment Opportunities. I think they're located out of New York, but they work with businesses and governments, and they help parolees, join the workforce and help them transition to a more productive life, lower recidivism. So in our particular case, they do litter removal 4 days a week, and the 5th day of the work week, they're in the classroom, learning life skills, planning a household budget, writing resumes. It's a really good program. The Ohio Department of Natural Resources is also on that contract, and they utilize them for helping build and maintain trails. And Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections participates in the contract by helping feed employees to the program. So we've kind of shifted having this group focus more on the unhoused individual camps. That's a dangerous and time-consuming job for our ODOT technicians. So they're involved in that whole process of remediating and cleaning up those areas. Next slide. And of course, our Incarcerated Individual program, we have 11 institutions that are out cleaning our roadways year-round. That program it began in 1999, and each year they're collecting about 80,000 bags of trash. And I did speak for a moment about these inmate labor going up to the Supreme Court because we didn't want it to be thought of and perceived as slavery. It's we do pay the incarcerated individuals money for going out and doing the collection. They do make more money in that duty than other positions within the institutions. So it's productive. It's something for them to work towards and to compete for the job. So it's a really good rehabilitation program, and we have a great relationship with the agency in doing that. Next slide, please. So, this whole talk is focused on collecting data through our litter research, and then, formulating and developing a litter prevention campaign, and then expanding our Adopt a Highway program, and then bringing on contractors, and then also using Sponsor a Highway. So we're pretty much following the recommendations that the Litter Research Project revealed. There are some other recommendations that we continue to work towards, and that's getting the support and the buy-in from law enforcement as well as prosecutors and judges. We want to continue fostering relationships with solid waste districts and making sure that we can all work toward having covered loads. And we want to continue working with local governments, environmental groups, companies to help us with the litter education and cleanup. And again, I'm going to say that the brand guidelines for our litter prevention campaign are available if you wanted to use those in your communities or in your organization. The other final recommendation was for outreach, to move from a reactive approach to a more proactive approach in reducing litter. We want to, present to the public that we do take it seriously, that there's a lot more that we could do with that $10 million that would benefit the public than going out and repeatedly picking up trash. And we want to use the communications campaign just to target those people who are littering, which are the 16 to 24-year-old drivers and smokers. So one recommendation was for us to repeat this study that we had concluded in 2019. That's been, 3.5 years already. They wanted us, or they recommended that we repeat the study after 5 years. And I'm really interested in doing that, just maybe not to the large scale that we did the initial study, but to see if these different groups that we're working with has reduced the visibility of litter out on Ohio's landscape. Next slide, please. So I guess we'll get back to the housekeeping if you have questions, because I'm right on the 12:30 mark. You can send those in, and I will reply to you personally. I'd like to thank you for your time, and I hope you got something out of this presentation. I'm always happy to talk with you, and my contact information should be available to you from my introduction. Thank you all.
Yep, Thank you. I will send out a copy of today's recording and a copy of the presentation to everyone, and I will include the contact information. So thank you so much for your time and have a great day.